Before we descend into the shadowed dimensions of the past, a brief clarification. This narrative is a work of historical fiction. It is constructed from the authentic strategic maneuvers of a transformative era designed to illuminate the silent fortitude of individuals, long eclipsed by formal archives. History is not merely recorded, it is encoded within imagery. At the Washington D.C. Museum, every day brings new time capsules. But in September 2024, an entity emerged that disrupted every rule of visual logic known to James Rivera, a decoder of cultural heritage. The leather case from Richmond, Virginia, contained more than a photograph. It held a social paradox. In 1889, amidst the tightening of social stratification, we find Thomas and Marcus, one white, one black, occupying the same frame with absolute symmetry in attire, bespoke wool suit symbols of elite status. At first glance, it is a message of unity. However, under the lens of systemic analysis, fractures begin to appear. Observe the hands. This is not a gentle touch of camaraderie. Thomas's knuckles are white from the mechanical pressure on Marcus's shoulder, a sign of acute tension or a restrictive effort. Marcus, with eyes harboring a sharp observational algorithm, holds his opposite hand in a clenched fist. The most jarring detail lies in the backdrop, a chain faintly rendered in the corner of a library of knowledge. Why does a symbol of confinement exist within a space designated for enlightenment? On the reverse side lies a trembling inscription, a form of extreme emotional data, last photo before departure. God forgive what we have done. This is not a future plan. It is an admission of an executed consequential act. What did they facilitate together that required spiritual salvation at the very moment their identities were being crystallized? Was it a journey toward a new horizon or an escape from collapsing structures? The investigation into the special arrangement of 1889 has only just begun. Every photograph harbors a secret, but some carry the weight of an entire era. What are your thoughts on the tension simmering beneath Thomas and Marcus's shoulder grip? Is it an act of protection or one of coercion? Share your theories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe as we join James Rivera in peeling back the next layers of truth in Dossier 1889. At the Library of Virginia, James and Patricia unearthed a dark chapter of post-war labor logistics. They discovered that Marcus was not merely a servant, he was a victim of a mechanism known as peonage. Through records dating back to 1866, William Whitmore established an appropriation algorithm. Marcus signed contracts he could not read, binding himself to fabricated debts. Every $5 monthly wage was countered by engineered expenses, ensuring the debt remained inexhaustible. This was a form of bondage by another name, where legal freedom was nullified by economic barriers. The explosion in the dossier occurred in the lawsuit of September 1889. Thomas Whitmore, the heir to the Oakwood estate, executed an act of structural betrayal. He sued his own father. The records hold a haunting phrase, "persons unlawfully detained." Thomas had discovered the fraudulent protocols his father used to maintain forced labor. In that moment, Thomas chose to align with Marcus, choosing truth over ancestral privilege. The photograph taken on September 14th serves as the final visual document confirming the alliance between the two friends before the system struck back. Less than 3 weeks after the photograph was taken, Thomas Whitmore died. The official cause was recorded as a misadventure during firearm maintenance. However, through an analytical lens, this is a statistical anomaly of the highest order. The death occurred precisely as Thomas was prepared to bring evidence of forced labor to light. The ensuing press silence, coupled with the swift validation by the sheriff and the family physician, suggests a consensus of the elite. They collectively engineered an administrative shroud to preserve the Whitmore reputation and extinguish any attempt to alter the social structure. The portrait with Thomas's intensely tight grip on Marcus's shoulder now carries its full meaning. It was a desperate anchor of a man who knew he was in peril, attempting to shield his companion. The chain in the backdrop is no longer decorative. It is a silent indictment of the very system they sought to fracture, but which ultimately consumed them. In 1912, the passing of William Whitmore inadvertently exposed a fracture in the family's security shroud. Within the probate records, a $500 debt linked to the Freeman case remained as an unresolved financial obligation. 23 years after the Oakwood incident, the Whitmore accounting system was forced to acknowledge a fundamental truth: they owed Marcus Freeman a price for his stolen liberty. This sum was more than a figure. It was proof that the systemic pressure initiated by Thomas had forced a compromise, even as William sought to bury the truth in silence. Marcus Freeman did not vanish into a void. He executed a strategic relocation. Abandoning Richmond, where the structures of social stratification were tightening, Marcus chose Philadelphia as his coordinate for identity reconstruction. In 1891, the First Baptist Church of Philadelphia recorded a new data entry point: Marcus Freeman, 24, from Virginia. This was not merely a religious record. It was a verification of his existence beyond the reach of the Whitmore influence. The most profound transformation lay in his journey toward economic sovereignty. In Virginia, Marcus was bound by an algorithm of debt. In Philadelphia, he evolved into a master carpenter. By 1895, his workshop on Lombard Street was not just a business. It was a monument to the destruction of structural shackles. From a man categorized as detained property, Marcus emerged as a proprietor operating his own economic framework. He proved that once an individual is decoupled from coercive barriers, their potential becomes limitless. In Philadelphia, circa 1899, Marcus Freeman was no longer an anonymous figure. He transformed his trauma at Oakwood into a blueprint of injustice. Through public addresses at community nodes like the Mother Bethel AME Church, Marcus exposed the operational mechanics of forced labor. He wasn't just telling a personal story, he was describing an exploitation algorithm that held thousands of others captive across the South. Marcus's 15-page testimony before Congress in 1902 stands as a masterclass in systemic analysis. He detailed how William Whitmore established a coercive financial matrix, illiteracy contracts, leveraging information asymmetry to establish unfavorable commitments, arbitrary surcharges, fabricating expenses for basic needs that perpetually exceeded actual income, structural collusion, The local sheriff's use of physical restraints to return Marcus to the plantation in 1874 demonstrated the lethal synergy between private interests and local authority. A jarring detail in the records is the role of Elizabeth Whitmore. By secretly teaching Marcus to read and write, she performed an act of informational liberation. Literacy became the decryption tool that allowed Marcus to perceive the absurdity of William's contracts. This provided the foundation for Thomas's awakening in 1888, when he returned from university to find his childhood companion still trapped within an obsolete framework. Thomas Whitmore did not opt for immediate direct confrontation. Instead, he conducted a clandestine forensic audit. He spent months duplicating business ledgers and fraudulent contracts, empirical data capable of dismantling his family's reputation in a court of law. The 1889 photograph, with its palpable tension, captures the exact moment these two friends stood on the precipice of a data revolution. They weren't just taking a portrait, they were verifying an alliance destined to alter history. In August 1889, a direct confrontation between value systems erupted at the Oakwood estate. Thomas Whitmore, supported by attorney Robert Pemberton, executed an act of social suicide, suing his own father to dismantle the architecture of forced labor. William Whitmore did not view this merely as a legal dispute. He saw it as a violation of bloodline loyalty. In William's world, tribal allegiance superseded any statute. But for Thomas, Marcus's liberty was a non-negotiable value, even if the cost was the total disintegration of the family reputation. September 14th, 1889. 4 days after filing the lawsuit, the portrait at Anderson & Sons was commissioned. This was not a memento of camaraderie, it was a visual manifesto. The choice of identical attire and an egalitarian pose was a calculated act of status reconstruction. Thomas sought to create irrefutable optical evidence for the public that Marcus Freeman was a free and equal human being. However, the inscription, "God forgive us," on the reverse side, revealed extreme psychological duress. Thomas understood that executing justice required the symbolic execution of the paternal bond. Fear enveloped both men as William's power networks began their counteroffensive. On October 2, 1889, a high-velocity ballistic event occurred in William's study. The gunshot did more than end the life of an heir. It triggered an evidence destruction protocol. In his final moments, Thomas delivered an escape code to Marcus' "Run Papers" desk. It was a final effort to protect the empirical data he had meticulously gathered. Immediately, the power alliance between the father and the sheriff established an alternative narrative. They transformed Marcus, the victim of the system, into the perpetrator of a calculated murder. Marcus was forced to activate his survival algorithm, retreating into the shadows, utilizing the plantation's topography to execute a clandestine extraction of vital documents. The battle was no longer in the courtroom. It was a race to secure the papers capable of exposing the absolute truth of Oakwood. Marcus's testimony revealed the ultimate legal weapon: judicial documents signed by a judge mandating the termination of all forced contracts and the restitution of stolen wages. Thomas executed a successful administrative raid on that fateful day. Marcus did not just flee with the clothes on his back. He carried a freedom algorithm papers proving he was no longer a debt object. His journey from Virginia to Philadelphia was not merely a geographic shift, but a reality reconstruction from a fugitive to a free citizen. Thomas Whitmore's death stands as a prime example of high-level structural interference. William Whitmore activated his entire network. The sheriff was bought to stage the scene. The medical system was coerced to validate a false cause of death. And the media was controlled to suppress independent investigation. However, the system overlooked a critical variable: Marcus Freeman's survival. He was the only living data capable of dismantling the entire cover-up narrative. In Philadelphia, Marcus executed a spectacular economic pivot. Arriving penniless, he established a workshop and evolved it into a construction firm with its own employees and premises. By 1910, census records identified the rise of a system proprietor. Marcus didn't just labor. He integrated into vital social nodes, serving on church boards and labor advocacy groups. He transformed his life debt to Thomas into a drive for community building, utilizing education as a decryption tool for liberty for the next generation. James Rivera is now faced with a massive data retrieval mission. He must locate Marcus's descendants, the potential custodians of the final fragment, the original legal documents, or the 1889 photograph itself. A feature article in the Philadelphia Tribune regarding successful Black entrepreneurs is the next clue. Did Marcus in that feature embed a hidden signal revealing where he stashed the evidence that could finally incinerate the Whitmore family reputation? What do you think of Marcus keeping those legal documents secret for years? Was it caution or a plan waiting for justice to ripen? Share your thoughts on this strategy of silence in the comments below. Records from 1935 confirm the frequency cessation of Marcus Freeman at age 70. His obituary in the Tribune was more than a list of accolades. It was a systemic outcome report. Marcus had completed the cycle from a labor object to a community architect. His lineage, carrying names like Thomas, William, and Elizabeth, functioned as a memory storage mechanism. Specifically, the name Thomas Freeman was not merely an identifier, it was a tribute code for the advocate who sacrificed his standing to establish the Freeman family's autonomy. The connection between Dorothy Hayes and Marcus Freeman illuminated the origin of the Richmond archives. These were not merely auctioned personal effects. They were unprocessed historical data. Marcus's granddaughter had maintained this information treasury for decades as an act of passive preservation. When James Rivera approached attorney Jennifer Park, he wasn't just searching for papers, he was executing a data recovery mission from a Victorian office located mere blocks from the original site of Anderson and Sons photography. Inside the boxes labeled Dorothy Hayes lay ribbon-bound letters, the internal communication protocols of the Freeman family. The 1929 letter to his son Thomas provides empirical evidence of the knowledge cipher. Marcus's refined literacy was the direct result of the secret educational protocol established by Elizabeth Whitmore. In this letter, Marcus confirmed a grim reality: his liberty was acquired through a life trade. Thomas Whitmore abandoned his structural privileges and ultimately his life to secure Marcus's sovereignty. James realized that truth never expires. It merely awaits the correct search algorithms to resurface. These letters do more than recount the past. They provide the decoding key for the tension captured in the 1889 portrait. Every photographed page is a step closer to dismantling the entire exploitation mechanism of Oakwood and honoring the heroism of an alliance that transcended racial barriers. The investigation has now shifted to the second box, potentially housing the original legal writs that Thomas delivered to Marcus in his final moments. In the second archive box, James noted a rigorous storage protocol within Marcus's business records. This was more than a professional habit. It was a psychological reflex. After being imprisoned by ghost contracts and fraudulent ledgers, Marcus transformed financial transparency into a protective shield. Documenting every invoice and contract was his way of ensuring that no exploitation algorithm could ever touch his family again. The third box contained Thomas Whitmore's ultimate weapon. The Richmond District Court order was not merely paper, it was a structural decoupling directive. It officially nullified every legal tether between Marcus and William Whitmore and established a restitution quantum, $500, the exact figure William carried as a spiritual debt until his passing in 1912. Thomas's signed affidavit was a poignant internal audit. He utilized empirical data, his father's own fraudulent ledgers, as legal evidence. He stated, "I submit this evidence as a citizen upholding the law and a friend honoring humanity." This declaration confirms that Thomas executed a privilege sacrifice. He understood that protecting Marcus's dignity meant accepting a high-velocity terminal consequence for himself. The photograph with the message, "We stand as equals here," remains the final notarization of the equality Thomas died to establish. Marcus's preservation of William Whitmore's 1912 obituary in the fourth box was an act of observing the collapse. Marcus did not keep it out of malice, but to verify the cessation of the entity that once controlled his destiny. James realized that Thomas had engineered a perfect contingency plan. If he fell, these documents would serve as the spokesperson for the truth. Marcus executed that legacy faithfully. He did not just flee. He extracted the entire operating system of justice to pass down to future generations. The fifth archival box contained Marcus Freeman's mental operating system, a leather-bound diary documenting his first decade in Philadelphia. This was not merely a notebook, it was a post-extraction log of his transition into reclaimed citizenship. The entry, dated January 15th, 1890. "I am free. Thomas died for that to happen," confirms a grim life exchange. Marcus transformed Thomas's sacrifice into the fuel for a brilliant life, evolving from an economic refugee into a high-impact contractor. A profound systemic detail emerged in the diary Marcus taught his son, Thomas Freeman, to read every night. This action perfectly simulated the educational protocol that Elizabeth Whitmore once executed in secrecy at Oakwood. Marcus was not just transmitting knowledge, he was passing down a courage code. Naming his son after his fallen friend was not only an act of remembrance, but a way for Thomas Whitmore to continue living within a new social structure where bravery superseded individual comfort. The meeting between James Rivera and Dr. Alicia Freeman at the National Museum was a moment of supreme data verification. For over a century, the story of Thomas Whitmore existed only as oral assets within the Freeman family legendary accounts, lacking physical substantiation. When James presented the legal writs and the original photograph, he converted these whispers of the past into an irrefutable historical entity. Alicia Freeman, the descendant of Marcus, was finally able to touch the travel permit her ancestor bought with blood. The Coleman family portrait is no longer an anonymous 1900 artifact. It is now a manifesto of identity. The update of the Smithsonian records serves as the final act to close a 135-year systemic error. The truth behind the accidental shooting has been unmasked. It was a targeted assassination by an old empire to suppress resistance, but it failed. Marcus Freeman survived not just to build structures with wood, but to serve as the guardian of a magnificent truth regarding trans-racial brotherhood. For Dr. Alicia Freeman, these documents were more than parchment. They were empirical evidence transforming a family myth into an irrefutable historical entity. The price of Marcus's liberty was not just hundreds of miles traveled, but a life trade executed by his closest ally. Thomas Whitmore rejected his role as an oppressor within the system to choose the standing of an equal human being. Together, they fractured an asymmetrical social structure to establish a shared humanistic frequency. The meeting between James Rivera and Robert Whitmore, a descendant of the perpetrator William Whitmore, was a moment of conscientious re-engineering. Robert did not choose to deny the corrupted data of his ancestor. He acknowledged the shame associated with William, while simultaneously finding pride in the integrity variable that was Thomas. This was a form of informational reconciliation when two lineages once on opposite poles of exploitation united to verify a single truth. They collectively recognized that economic gain built upon coercion is a legacy that must be illuminated and transformed. In February 2025, the exhibition officially opened. The 1889 portrait was displayed as the epicenter of an information network. Professional lighting highlighted the stress indicators on both men's bodies, Thomas's intense grip and Marcus's clenched fist. The exhibition did not merely display artifacts, it exposed an exploitation operating system known as peonage. Visitors witnessed the fraudulent contracts, the algorithms once used to imprison humans, and cross-referenced them with Thomas's courageous affidavit. Thomas Whitmore was not portrayed as a flawless savior, but as a transformative agent. Raised in privilege, he chose to betray an unjust system to protect humanity. James Rivera's journey concludes with a powerful message: silence may protect an empire for 135 years, but it only takes one correctly preserved signal of truth to dismantle every wall of deception. In a specialized sector of the exhibition, the reality of Marcus Freeman's post-extraction life in Philadelphia is laid bare. This is not merely a success story, it is empirical proof of an economic autonomy trajectory. Visitors engage with growth metrics from a modest carpentry shop to major construction contracts. The exhibition establishes a systemic message liberty when operated with intellect and preparation results in extraordinary achievement probabilities. The most emotional highlight lies in the documentary footage of the descendants. Dr. Alicia Freeman and Robert Whitmore, representatives of two lineages once stationed at opposite ends of an exploitation structure, now occupy the same frame. Robert Whitmore executed a courageous confrontation with ancestral shadows. He acknowledged the moral errors of his lineage and honored Thomas Whitmore as the integrity variable that disrupted the brutal logic of the era. This is a reconciliation of historical data, where truth is accepted to heal transgenerational trauma. The exhibition provides a sharp educational lens into post-emancipation exploitation architectures. Visitors aren't just looking at photos, they are decoding the mechanics debt bondage systems, convict leasing, and predatory contracts. The presence of physical documents allows the public to understand that legal liberation in 1865 was only the preliminary stage. The true battle lay in dismantling coercive codes hidden beneath the legal shroud of the Jim Crow era. As the museum closes, James Rivera stands before the 1889 portrait one final time. 18 days after that photo was taken, Thomas sacrificed his life. But his directive, "Use this evidence to prove the truth," was never neutralized. Marcus Freeman executed a transcontinental memory transport, keeping the flame of justice alive for 135 years through the back streets of Philadelphia and the closets of his descendants. The photograph, once a silent object harboring a dark secret, has evolved into an operating system of hope, a testament that brotherhood and integrity can defeat any inhuman system. The truth has finally reclaimed its rightful place within the currents of history. This journey proves that even the smallest image possesses the power to reshape the legacy of generations even 135 years later. Do we possess the inner strength of James or Alicia to seek out the stories that time has nearly erased? Share your reflections below to honor this profound journey of justice and resilience. Don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to decode the world's most remarkable dossiers together.